And welcome to the latest episode of The Best is Surrey. I'm Marisa Heath.
And I'm Paul Deach.
So, Paul, how's your week been so far?
Busy, very busy. Lots going on in my area. And one of our colleagues is not well at the moment, David Lewis at Camberley West, divisional councillor. So I've agreed to take on all his casework while he's undergoing his treatment. So things have got very, very busy.
Well done for doing that. I wish all the best to him and hope that
Yeah,
he's okay.
he's a
Um,
good guy.
yeah, no, he is a good guy and he works really hard for his constituents. So I'm sure all thoughts will be with him.
Yeah,
I'm going to start on a slightly dark note myself, which is today we've had news all about Liam Payne. It's not
yeah,
suicide, but the indications are something's happened that's quite serious, drug related. He's come off a
yeah,
balcony, I think it was in Argentina, and died. Now, I've never been a One Direction fan, but I do remember them auditioning all those years ago. And obviously, he's been someone who's got a huge amount of fans. But the
yeah.
reason that I wanted to talk about it was because we know that male suicide and male mental health is a big issue, actually, nationally, but also in Surrey. And I think one of the biggest causes of death in men is suicide, actually. So it's something I think many of us have been touched by. We've known someone, or we've heard of someone, or a colleague, or something where something happens. We've been on a train when somebody has jumped in front of the train and you're stuck on it for ages. And people, I think, just need to talk even more about this. I know we have started to talk more, and we've been putting services in to help people. But male mental health, do you think it's an issue? Do you think it's a problem? There's a lot of
Oh,
men, isn't there?
definitely, definitely an issue. And, I get emails from constituents all the time who are looking for help. And it's something personally that has affected me. Um, Firstly, because um, one of my earliest childhood memories was of a very close friend of my father whose son committed suicide in a terrible way. And one of my earliest memories of being a child is just how upset everybody was. And I remember my mum wailing, when they got the news. It was just terrible. Um, and also from a mental health point of view, I've always considered myself to be quite a strong-minded person. Um, but as you know, my journey with active travel and my my bike and all the rest of it, I never thought it at any point that I had mental health issues. But it's only when I discovered my bike and started riding along places like the Basingstoke Canal that I realised how stressed I was with local politics, with work, and everything else. And it made me realise actually, maybe I'm not as strong in the head as I thought I was. So, yeah, it is a big problem. And men are not very good at um, vocalizing their issues, I have to say. So that's why things like the initiatives, actually, that I think you introduced me to during your campaign, like the men's shed thing, um, just incredible local initiatives where
Make a
men
difference.
can get together and through friendship form friendships and support each other. I mean, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about that.
I went to visit Men's Shed and I was blown away. I'm not just saying that. I visit a lot of charities and organisations. It's a weekly occurrence, but I was blown away by what they were doing there because it was just basically volunteers coming together to provide a safe space where men could just hang out, and they didn't need to talk if they didn't want to, but they knew they were with like-minded guys. They were making friends, they were coming up with new skills. It just was a really powerful thing that was making a big difference. Now, I think everyone has an element of mental health actually at some point in their lives. I think it's quite
Mm,
difficult. Extremely lucky if you get a way of not feeling depressed or down at any point in your life, or having something happen to you that pushes you in that direction. So I think it is important to carry on having the conversations about this and to make people feel confident talking about it. Because, I've worked in some quite glamorous sort of things in my past, and I've known people that are very wealthy, very beautiful, very successful who've been really depressed.
yeah.
it's not contained to, people who can't find a job or people who feel that they're overweight or whatever other thing you might think. All of us can be hiding those demons behind closed walls. And obviously, Liam Payne had some quite serious demons, I'm guessing, if the reports are correct, and they might not. We've got to wait and see what comes out of them. But I just want to put it out there that if you are feeling low or bad, recognize there'll be other people around you who felt that way too. And
Yeah.
I honestly genuinely be open to anyone I knew coming to talk to me about that without judgment. And I think you would too. I think loads of us out there would be. We'd want to help because experiencing a suicide is just horrendous.
Oh,
I don't think you can get over it when it's a
it,
family friend or whatever.
it is, and we know, don't we, that there's a lot of issues with mental health with young people and all the rest of it. But actually, my experience within my own orbit, which is very small, but my daughter, I know my daughter and a lot of her friends, and what they're very good at is actually talking about their mental health, and there's no, from their point of view, is no stigma attached to it or anything like that, and it impresses me that a lot of young people also, although there are some that have their struggles, also a lot of them have probably a lot more emotional intelligence than what some of us sort of old timers have. So yeah, I think it's just a lot of it is about breaking down the barriers and the stigma and not be afraid to talk about your problems.
Yes, well, hearts go out to anyone who's experienced any of those issues.
Yeah,
And maybe we could put something in the chat around this podcast about where they can go for help and where there's support. Because I
sure.
know it's Surrey have put investment into this and
Um,
work with health providers. So let's try and do that. Now, I'm going to stay being quite dark, but I promise you, listeners, it will change in a moment because I just wanted to mention the horrendous outcomes of the inquiry into Sarah Sharif this week that have been in the press, and my heart just breaks for that
oh,
little.
it's terrible.
I'm both lividly, wildly angry of what her father and those people that were supposed to be looking after her did, but also just honestly, it's just the most heartbreaking thing to read about this poor little girl going to school, having to cover up these injuries. It makes me sick. But the reason I wanted to raise it was to also connect into the work that social services does. Now, in a moment, we're going to talk about whether Surrey is a better place than it was 20 years ago or a worse place. And a lot of people say to me, I'm paying council tax, blah, 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 and what am I getting back for it? And children's social services is one of the things you're getting back for it. So we don't see this. A lot of us don't. I sat on a fostering panel for about 7 or 8 years. So I got a bit of a glimpse behind the curtain. But there are hundreds of children out there that are unfortunately experiencing neglect or being abused, and social services is trying to find them. And when they don't find them, the consequences are as terrible as what has happened to Sarah. So your taxes are going on something massively important. I know they need to go on other things as well, but I also just wanted to pay a moment to think about those social workers and all the people involved in that because it's a really hard place to work. I've got friends who work in that environment. My good God, if you're talking about mental health, that is a hard job seeing some of those things you see. And
Yeah.
we should always be extra cautious about this. If we ever have sort of fear that a child is being abused or neglected, we should raise it. It's really important.
Absolutely. So 70% of the Surrey County Council budget of about, I think it's about 1.2 billion, 70% of that goes on children's services and adult social care, right? And they're two of the most important statutory services our council, is responsible for. And, when it comes to looked after children, though, my heart goes out to some of those social workers because they see the very worst that society has. That some of the most appalling cases of neglect and abuse and so on, and it's very difficult for them to have to deal with that. And I would imagine that. I'm not familiar with the intricacies of this particular case in Woking, um, but I would imagine there'll be a lot of social workers who probably have some horror stories, but can't share them. And it's not something we can talk about as corporate parents. As county councillors, we are all corporate parents responsible for the children in the care of Surrey County Council. we're not allowed to talk about some of the cases that we get through, but it does happen, and I think some people might be quite surprised at how close it happens to them. They're
This is
just not aware of it. And this particular case in Woking just brings that very close to home, doesn't it?
No, it does. And I think, I don't know the number for certain, so don't pin me down on it, but I think we've got about 1,000 children in care in Surrey, but then you've also got loads of others on the risk register. At some point, we should speak to the cabinet member who deals with children's services to drill down on this topic. But it is a large number of children who are not getting the opportunities and love from their parents that unfortunately many others can take for granted. It's really, really difficult conversation to be had. And I think the police as well, people talk about the
Oh yeah.
police around, but they're dealing with this child abuse, child violence, and these sorts of issues that must be incredibly hard.
And utmost respect to all the social workers, all the authorities involved in the police, like you say, all the partner agencies. Utmost respect to all of them for life-changing work. Sometimes things slip through the net, and it's not always life-changing in a good way. But I think for the most part, it is.
Yeah. Okay, just before we go off that topic, I'd just like to do a quick shout out to anyone who thinks they want to get involved in helping children. Fostering is an amazing thing to do. It doesn't have to be limited. So my sister lives by herself. She's got a full-time job and she fosters, for example. So you don't necessarily have to be a certain type to foster. And also you can do respite where you have a child when their foster parents have actually gone away or they've got other commitments or something. You look after that child for a couple of days. There's all sorts of ways to get involved in helping our looked after children. So you can Google Surrey fostering and have a chat with someone. It's, an amazing thing to do. But anyway, let's go on to the big topic. So we were having a conversation. This evolved out of a conversation we were having about whether Surrey had got better over the time that we've been here or worse. And it seems that people have got all sorts of different views. But let me just put some context around it. So Surrey's always been known as a prosperous green county, and the kind of vision is that it's full of investment bankers and wealthy people in their 4x4s, and people choose to live here. It's just outside of London, but they can jump in their car, they can do what they like, and they can live in a nice big house. That's the kind of, when people say Surrey, that's what they think. The truth of the matter is somewhat different to that. We need to first challenge the idea that Surrey is just full of wealthy people, because it isn't at all. And that is a view that's been really detrimental to us as a county. So Labour slashed our funding savagely in the 2000s. They believed that we were too wealthy and that money needed to be sent to other parts of the country. So I remember, because I joined the council in 2003. So I remember, and the budget's being cut, 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 cut. We've never stopped cutting them since, basically, even under the Conservatives. Things have got harder and harder, and there's a number of reasons we'll talk about as to why that's happened. But we are the second biggest contributor to the Treasury after London. Sorry, we make a lot of money. And I mean we, as in the residents, make a lot of money in this county. But that money tends to then go off to the Midlands or up north in order to fund the services they need there and the investment needed. And as a result, some people might say, well, we've had a lack of investment here. Why are our roads not good enough? Why haven't we seen more to deal with congestion? Why aren't our services absolutely top rate? The truth is we've got deprivation in this country, and it is in this county, sorry, and it is serious. And there's numerous pockets where social issues exist and where people can't access the support they need. And that is a problem that has grown. Now, alongside all of that, you've got residents that say we've now got too much congestion in this county. It's annoying. You can't just jump in your car and appear somewhere. You're stuck in traffic, particularly in rural areas. There's many more cars on those formerly quiet country roads. Services aren't as easy to get in. So I've just asked for a blood test for my GP, and it was 2 weeks to get a phone call and then about 3 weeks to go and get the blood test. That seems to be becoming quite normal. Urbanisation of areas, so areas where you had green fields and lots of land, we've seen building on them. That's changed parts of Surrey. News about councils screwing up. Our Surrey councils used to be top notch in delivering. They were respected across the country as being always financially astute and always managing to deliver within the budgets. And we know that we've had increased taxes and costs, whether it's parking charges or whatever else. So because of all of that, and I promise I'm not going to be negative this whole podcast, because of all of that, residents seem to be getting angrier. They feel they're paying a lot of money and getting less. And I think we need to address that and think about exactly what you get as a Surrey resident, and whether we have indeed gone sort of backwards in quality of life, stayed the same, or gone forwards. What's your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I've lived in this county since 2003,
Same.
right? My wife comes from this area, so I live in Deepcut. My wife comes from Frinley. Um, but I have to say, I think that life has definitely improved in that 20 odd years, without a doubt. But I do also think that a lot of the things that we expect, so I've spoken before about what I call soft infrastructure. So you've just mentioned your GP appointments. Well, that's something that residents complain to me about all the time. Increasingly so, I'm getting complaints about parents not being able to get the first choice of school. In fact, in some cases, they're lucky if they get fourth or fifth choice
Mhm.
with their school. I remember my next door neighbour when she was looking for schools, she was offered something that wasn't even a choice, you know, and miles away as well. They got it sorted out in the end, but even so, this soft infrastructure it is a real problem, and a lot of that, I think, these lack of services or strain on services is a result of overdevelopment.
Yeah.
Okay, that is the big problem, and it's the things that may seem inconsequential to a lot of people, but you know, the fact that you can't get a parking space in the local village, you know, people parking on pavements because they've built housing developments with not enough parking provision. All these things are starting to get on top of people, and something else as well. Partly we're responsible for some of um, the aesthetics as a county council of our local community, so with grass verges and all the rest of it. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn when I say, you know, we have cocked up the grass verges for the last couple of years because we took over the contract and I think it's fair to say weren't properly prepared for it. They're starting to solve that problem now, but it has taken a long time. But one of the complaints that I'm getting quite a lot lately, and I noticed it myself as well as I came off um, the M3 and came through Camberley. So the roads that are the responsibility of National Highways, not Surrey County Council, there are literally weeds that are turning into flipping trees. They're that big. Um, you know, there's just no maintenance of those areas whatsoever, and it's making the place look untidy. Now, there are a lot of residents who think, well, actually, I'm quite happy for them to grow wild, and I think I'm one of them, to be honest. But I also recognise that there are a lot of residents who just think it makes the place look really untidy, unkempt, and all the rest of it, and neglected. And you know, I can understand why they think, "Gosh, I'm paying all this money, one of the highest council tax rates in the country, and look at the state of the place."
But let's talk a bit about the responsibility here, because I think you're right. Councils and government need to take responsibility, but it's also bigger than that. So litter dropping, for example, we've seen a massive increase in litter dropping. It's become much more prevalent. You've now got
Epidemic.
around the place clearing up litter in their own communities. That is a social issue. Same as spitting chewing gum out, same as doing graffiti, same as, you know, going to smash bottles in the playground, all of that kind of thing. This all leads to a feeling of it not being as pristine and well looked after as it once was.
How many times are you in your car and you see somebody without even a care in the world flick a lit fag butt out of their window? It drives me mad. And you know, we've got problems with wildfires here and all the rest of it. It's just so scuzzy. It really is, and it drives me mad.
Yeah.
Drives me mad.
So just picking up on that point, so I think that a lot of the issues come from one, population increase. We've had however many more million people come into the UK over the last 20 years, and they've needed places to live. So the immigration thing is an issue. I also think well, I don't think, I know we've got an aging population now. So that means a lot of the money has had to go, you mentioned the 70% on adult social services and children's services. A lot of the money that would have been used to make the area look pristine has now been diverted into adult social care. This isn't a blame thing. We all get
Yeah.
old end of the day, but that's the reality of it. Our demographic is much older and we've got to look after these people. That's a necessity. We've also seen increases in pressures. So special educational needs, this has been quite a hot topic recently, but across the country, the numbers have gone absolutely vertical on the amount of children needing provision, and none of the councils have been prepared for it. There's not one council that's doing it well because it's taken them by surprise. Whether this is more testing, more awareness by parents, or just more prevalence of special educational needs, I don't know. But again, that's funding. That means money needs to go to look after those people who should be a priority. We've had a load of people moving out of London who have a very different cultural attitude, potentially. I'm not saying all of them by any stretch, but they've moved out of maybe an urban place in London, so it's different. We've got more single people now in Surrey.
Yeah.
Most of my friends are single, but they're therefore having a house or a flat or something. There's less sharing of space and things. We haven't had enough houses built, but in other places we have had too many houses built, which has changed the area. So that hasn't seemed very fair. And you might want to talk about deep cut in a moment. And we've also had decisions of people having to concrete over their front lawns and things like that in order to park their cars and things, which has changed the area, led to more flooding, and other sort of issues of it not looking like the rural sort of quaint villages that we've been used to. So there's so many different reasons for why Surrey has changed. In an area like yours, you've had a lot of development, haven't you? Do you think you've had too much development?
Oh, without a doubt, way too much development. I mean, in my tiny village of Deepcut, um, we've taken um, on our old local plan, which is being updated, but on our old local plan, our small village has taken 45% of the overall borough target for housing
Wow.
between whenever that was, when the old local plan was, up until 2026. 45% in one village. Um, and there's been other development in my county council division over and above that too. Some quite what would be deemed as medium-sized development. So yeah, and the impact of that is enormous. And Deepcut, the Mindenhurst development at Deepcut, which is 1,200 houses, is not even a quarter built yet. But already we feel the impact of that with the strain on GPs and all the soft infrastructure things that I mentioned. I mean, we have got a new school, which is great, got a new primary school, but there's shortage of school places all over, right across the board, and that's causing a real problem too.
Yeah. It's the same as the sort of big picture stuff like the drainage and Thames Water and all of that kind of thing. We don't ever seem, and I think this goes back to the election periods, it being 4 or 5 years, there's no long-term plan. So when people decided, and this was frankly under a Labour government where the housing numbers came in, I remember 2005 or something, we were tearing our hair out because we were just being forced to take so much housing in the Runnymede area. And none of it was being done with this long-term vision of how are we going to improve the train networks then? What are we going to do around that? How are we going to make sure the schools are there? How are we going to make sure the roads can cope with all of this? It was done on an ad hoc development there, development there, development there. Now they have brought in all of these different things like SIL, community infrastructure levies, and different ways that developers can contribute to the area. But
It
I think
scratches the surface, though, doesn't it?
it's because again it's small amounts. We never did things, and this is cross political blame. We've never done things in a strategic, let's look at the whole of Surrey and what we where we can sort of put the investment in sustainable transport that will avoid people needing to use cars, or make sure there's a GP and a hospital and a new hospital built. Yes, it would have meant pain in certain areas because people would have had to take all that development, but it would have meant less pain overall and better development that would have protected Surrey broadly.
Yeah, and I think that speaking, trying to find solutions to these problems, I think, and this is a conversation for another podcast. We can't go over it today because we're running out of time, but is unitarization. I think that we had an opportunity several years ago for the possibility of a single unitary authority for Surrey. It's ridiculous, I think, that you have 12 local authorities when you include the top tier authority, Surrey County Council, but 11 boroughs and districts as well, and parish councils on top of that. There's quite a lot of parish councils in Surrey. And when you consider that, that means we've got 12 chief executive officers all on 200 grand a year each. You've got 12 finance officers, 12 legal officers, and 12 departments of everything: planning departments, licensing departments, marketing and communications departments, democratic services departments, you name it. In this day and age, I think that is an old and tired system.
Yeah,
and we had an opportunity to fix it, um, you know, and that would save a lot of money and attract a lot of funding from government as well. But
it would
um,
also stop the tribalism of people say in an area like yours, it's a district or a borough, let's put all the housing there or something. It would give a sort of wider sort of look around the whole of the county, as I've said. But just I think we've got to answer the question, do we think Surrey's better or worse? But before we get onto that question, which will be at the end of this, we know Labour have got significant housing plans. Now they have made a very deliberate decision to cut the numbers in London, which seems absolutely mad to me because London's the place you should be building up and getting density in. London's the place people want to live. London's the place where you've got the affordability issue. So that should be a priority to me. But they've decided to cut the numbers in London, and we know they're looking to Surrey to take a huge amount of it. What is
without a doubt.
for us? What does that mean for hospitals and GPs? Are we going to get investment for all of that? What does that mean for the countryside? You start. What do you think it means for you? What
I'll tell you what it means. It's very simple. It's, all the problems we've just discussed, or, in 10 years' time, when this all starts to really become realised, um, they'll go, oh, they'll scratch their heads and go, oh, flipping it, yeah, we need to build more hospitals, or we need to train more teachers, and we need more GPs. We need all those things now, and we've needed all those things. They should have been thinking about that 20 years ago, because we know how long these things take to bring about. Um, you know, and as you mentioned earlier, successive governments, Conservatives and Labour, have both got a hand in responsibility of that. So I think that we need some more strategic thinking. Um, is basically, the only way that we're going to deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's a reality we need more housing because people want their children to be able to buy a house in Surrey, and we need social workers and all of those other very important people we spoke about earlier. What I'm worried about is that Labour congratulates itself on the 1960s because it had one of the record house building. They built more houses then than any other time. But when you look at the architecture of those houses, you can go into London and things, you always see those sort of blocks. They
Mm,
look absolutely awful.
they do.
About is the character of Surrey being changed by just having the most ugly buildings thrown up because they're cheap and they're quick and they want to reach their targets. So that's what I'm most concerned about, that we're going to see the character of Surrey really damaged, and then more cars piled up on the sides of roads, parked, all over the place on the verges and things like that. It could end up that Surrey just looks a mess if we don't do this really well.
Well, you're not the only one worried about that. There was an article I read the other day, yesterday, I think, that there's worries there's a place in Leatherhead, so under Mole Valley District Council, that they're worried they're going to build over a park area, and their fears it's going to be turned into Croydon. I mean, I know Croydon. I used to live in Godstone, and I had an office in Whiteleaf. I know Croydon. It's not as bad as everyone makes out, to be honest. And I've got a lot of friends who live in that area, but I do understand people's concerns, and I think that residents now need to start forming part of the conversation if we're gonna, because quite often people sort of get involved when it's too late.
Mm.
Now is the time to get involved with these things and voice concerns, talk to your MPs, talk to your councillors, that type of thing.
Exactly that. Get really politically involved because it's going to take a big fight to make sure we get the right outcomes out of this. And residents are the pressure that makes politicians act for the votes or whatever it is. That is what will happen. People like you and I will do it generally because we're interested in it and things, but nothing gets you galvanized more than residents kind of saying, right, we expect you to deal with this. Now, there will be the fact that Labour can do what it wants with its big majority. It can change the planning law and it can come in here. Already they can already say things like we want 60 or 70% affordable in every development. If they wanted to, they can do that.
They
Um,
can now, but already I'm reading, um, there's cracks appearing already in that Labour government, ministers briefing against each other and concerns about the budget and all this sort of stuff. It's going to be very interesting to see what they do with that majority, and whether it'll hold, and whether the discipline within that Labour parliamentary party will hold. But
I mean, there's going to be Labour MPs of residents who are going to be furious as well about building. I know they're trying to focus it on the Liberal and Conservative seats more, but there will be Labour MPs as well under massive pressure here. Just
yeah,
before we end this, the to me, the ultimate is we need something back for taking this housing and things. So where is the new hospital? When are we getting a new hospital? Where are the GPs coming forward? What are we getting? If they come forward and say we're going to do this, that, the other with housing, they need to have a damn good offer around those sorts of things. I haven't seen anything yet. I think Frimley's got some upgrades. They've agreed potentially to do some upgrades, but it's not a new hospital, is it?
Well, that's what's supposed to be happening, but the reality is it'll be at least 10 years before that's delivered.
Wow. Okay.
At least, in to my mind. Um,
Brilliant.
so, and it sounds like some of these houses are going to go up, um, before then. But I think the key message has to be, right, we wrap up this segment. The key message has to be, um, get involved, talk to your elected representatives, letting them know what your views are.
It definitely does. And just to end on a positive note, because I did promise it, here's a few reasons why Surrey is still a phenomenal place to live. It does remain a really desired place. People still want to come and live in Surrey. Property prices are high for a reason. We've got the most beautiful villages. If you go round this county, you're honestly like, this is my favourite village. No, this is my favourite village. They are amazing. We've got world leading countryside in Surrey. We heard from James Heard the other
Great, yeah.
about that. Woking train service shows how if you do get investment, having a train 20 minutes into Waterloo is a game changer. If we could get that in other parts like Dorking and Virginia Water in your area and things, that would be a game changer. More complex in your area, I know, because you don't have a direct line. Our universities are going up in profile. University of Surrey and Royal Holloway are doing really, really well. So that's a massive asset, bringing young people in. We've got masses of businesses that are keeping this country afloat, all in Surrey. Entrepreneurs, self-employed, amazing people doing great things. We've got the River Thames scheme, which is the biggest infrastructure project in the whole of the southeast. 650, 700 million quid being spent in Surrey. So that's exciting. But most significantly is we have residents like none other, residents that are successful, switched on, community minded, and will make sure that Surrey's protected. So whilst we've spoken today about all of these threats and changes, and we're not denying them at all, we know we've got some really excellent people that will protect Surrey and it will still remain a phenomenal county. I've got no doubt about it.
Without a doubt.
What,
So
go on, I was just going to say, what is your best place in Surrey this week? Let's get to the exciting stuff now.
you've probably come to gather by now, Marissa, I'm a very food orientated kind of food motivated. I'm like a dog. I'm food motivated. And I love discovering new places to eat. And when I was in Rotterdam, I discovered some amazing sort of Korean type restaurants. And so I'm really into my Korean food at the moment. And I wanted to really sort of, seek one out nearby. And I did a little search and discovered there's actually one at Market Walk in Woking, which is where in episode one I talked about Boz's fruit and veg stall, and I visit there regularly. So when I was in Woking earlier in the week, I thought, right, I'm going to go there for my lunch, and it was really, really good. It's called, I've got to pull up the name because I couldn't um, I couldn't remember it. I'm gonna have to. Here it is. It's Shin's Bippin Cafe at Market Walk in Woking. I'm gonna spell that 'cause I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it right. It's Bip Imbap, Bimbap. So it's the Bip Imbap Cafe at Market Walk in Woking, and yeah, the food is lovely.
Best casual kind of place, like drop in
Very
lunch.
casual. It's street food, and they've got some tables that you can. It's all undercover. They've got some tables you can sit at, but if it's in the winter, it's semi outside, so you're going to be pretty cold. But yeah, really, really lovely food. So it's Korean and Japanese cuisine, and yeah, I would definitely recommend it.
Good. Okay.
What
Um,
about you?
Mine this week is I didn't realise we had a sculpture park in Surrey, and we do. It's in Churt, which is
Yeah,
Farnham, and you can go and visit it, and it's got thousands, hundreds, thousands, a lot of sculptures, like big and small, all
yeah,
over. So it's really, really beautiful. They've got 300 renowned artists there with about 600 to 700 sculptures. So you walk around 2 miles of woodland, and they've got
Wow.
sculptures kind of dotted around the area. So you might get some sort of modern art thing, and then you might get a sculpture of a wolf or something. And they're from all over the world. People come and visit this place from all over the world to choose their sculptures. Now, I'm quite a fan of sculptures. I have this lofty hope that one day I'll live in a massive estate where I'll just have huge sculptures all over the place. Hasn't happened,
Yeah.
but who knows? And yeah, so you can go and visit it. It's open from 10 to 5 every single day, and it's really beautiful land as well. So it's easy to get to. The only thing about it that I thought was slightly off-putting is it's £15 per person to go in.
Right.
It's free for children under 4, and for over 65s or disabled or students, it's £10. But I just thought if you were taking a kid that's like 5 and you had to pay £15 for two parents and a child, that might put you off a tiny bit to see sculptures. However, it is art at the end of the day. There is
Yeah.
maintaining that land and keeping it going. I think get yourself a coffee, particularly if you're two parents and the kids are at school, or you're an elderly couple and you don't have those sorts of ties. I think a really nice walk. You can take your dogs as well. Yeah, just really interesting because Surrey is actually a place of art. We do have a lot of artists and a
Do.
lot of activity going on, and I thought it was really cool that it was here.
Well, I enjoy my mobile sort of photography and creativity. That sounds like somewhere I'd quite like to visit, actually.
They've
Did
got
did
websites to look
Right,
at.
no, I have seen. Some people I know have been there, and I've seen on their sort of Instagram feeds, pictures. It looks interesting. Did you notice in the car park if they've got any D racks for so that I can lock my bike to?
Can't remember, but they did say they've got bike facilities on their
I'll
website.
have a look. Yeah,
Um,
I
uh,
quite fancy that.
to lobby them about. But yeah,
Yeah,
no, a really nice. I mean, you'll see some of the examples of the art on the website, the sculptures, and sometimes the really big sculptures can be mind blowing. They're really beautiful. Like they've got one of a massive face and things.
right.
It's just like walking around an art gallery, but outside with your dog and a cup of coffee.
I really fancy it. So yeah, thanks for that. Nice one. Well, it's so we'll be back this time next week. And yeah, I've really enjoyed this session. So thanks very much, Marissa.
See you next week. See you, everyone.
Yeah, bye now.